Hello and welcome to Daily Memory Lab study session number 17. In today's study session, we will do round 4 of Supply Under GST, page number 1 to 10, and then we will do round 3 of page number 52 to 56. Then we will do round 2 of page number 72 to 75, the last 3 to 4 pages. And then we will start the new chapter, Charge of GST, and we will cover roughly 5 to 6 pages today. So on that note, let us set up the pre-study session intention and then we will be off to studies. Now I'm going to study for 30 to 60 minutes with full focus. In this study session, I lower down all my expectations and embrace imperfection. I may or may not get big breakthroughs in this study session and I'm totally okay with it. I will most likely make mistakes in the next 30 to 60 minutes, and if I make them, I am not going to judge myself. I embrace my mistakes and reset my ambitions. My goal is not to achieve perfection. My goal is only to make a tiny progress in the next 30 to 60 minutes. On that note, let us begin Supply Under GST revision round 4. Supply Under GST, let us start page number 1 to 10. Introduction. A taxable event is any transaction or occurrence that results in a tax consequence. Before levying any tax, a taxable event needs to be ascertained. It is the foundation stone of any taxation system. It determines the point at which tax would be levied. Under the earlier indirect tax regime, the framework of taxable event in various statutes was prone to catena of interpretations resulting in litigation since decades. The controversies largely related to issues like whether a particular process amounted to manufacture or not, whether the sale was predetermined sale, whether a particular transaction was a sale of goods or rendering of services, etc. The GST laws resolve these issues by laying down one comprehensive taxable event, that is supply of goods or services or both. Various taxable events, namely manufacture, sale, rendering of service, purchase, entry into a territory of state, etc., that existed prior to introduction of GST have been done away with in favor of just one event called supply. The GST law, by levying tax on the supply of goods and or services, departs from the historically understood concept of taxable event under the state VAT laws, excise laws, and service tax law, that is, sale, manufacture, and provision of services, respectively. In the GST regime, the entire value of supply of goods and or services is taxed in an integrated manner, unlike the earlier indirect taxes, which were charged independently either on the manufacture or sale of goods or on the provision of services. Now let us read the relevant definitions. Goods means every kind of movable property other than money and securities, but includes actionable claim, growing crops, grass, and other things attached to or forming part of the land which are agreed to be severed before supply and are under a contract of supply. 2 Clause 52. Services means anything other than goods, money, and securities, but includes activities relating to the use of money or its conversion by cash or by any other mode from one form, currency or denomination, to another form, currency or denomination for which a separate consideration is charged. Explanation. It is clarified that the expression services includes facilitating or arranging transactions in securities. 2 Clause 102. Principal means a person on whose behalf an agent carries on the business of supply or receipt of goods or services or both. 2 Clause 88. Competent authority means such authority as may be notified by the government. 2 Clause 29. Family means the spouse and children of the person and the parents, grandparents, brothers and sisters of the person if they are wholly or mainly dependent on the said person. 2 Clause 49. Government means the central government. 2 Clause 53. Local authority means A panchayat as defined in clause D of Article 243 of the Constitution, a municipality as defined in clause E of Article 243p of the Constitution, a municipal committee, Zilla Parishad, district board, and any other authority legally entitled to or entrusted by the central government or any state government with the control or management of a municipal or local fund. A cantonment board as defined in section 3 of the Cantonments Act 2006, a regional council or a district council constituted under the 6th schedule to the Constitution, a development board constituted under Article 371 and Article 371J of the Constitution, a regional council constituted under Article 371A of the Constitution. Okay. To clause 69, that was consideration. Consideration in relation to the supply of goods or services or both includes any payment made or to be made, whether in money or otherwise, in respect of, in response to, or for the inducement of the supply of goods or services or both, whether by the recipient or by any other person, but shall not include any subsidy given by the central government or a state government. The monetary value of any act or forbearance in respect of, in response to, or for the inducement of the supply of goods or services or both, whether by the recipient or by any other person, but shall not include any subsidy given by the central government or a state government. However, a deposit given in respect of the supply of goods or services or both shall not be considered as payment made for such supply unless the supplier applies such deposit as consideration for the said supply. Okay, next, actionable claim. It means a claim to any debt other than a debt secured by mortgage of immovable property or by hypothecation or pledge of movable property or to any beneficial interest in movable property not in the possession, either actual or constructive, of the claimant, which the civil courts recognize as affording grounds for relief, whether such debt or beneficial interest be existent, accruing, conditional, or contingent. Section 2, Clause 1 of CGST Act, read with Section 3 of Transfer of Property Act 1882. Manufacture. Manufacture means processing of raw materials or inputs in any manner that results in emergence of a new product having a distinct name, character, and use, and the term manufacturer shall be construed accordingly. Section 2, Clause 72. Money means the Indian legal tender or any foreign currency, check, promissory note, bill of exchange, letter of credit, draft, pay order, traveler's check, money order, postal or electronic remittance, or any other instrument recognized by the Reserve Bank of India when used as a consideration to settle an obligation or exchange with Indian legal tender of another denomination, but shall not include any currency that is held for its numismatic value. 2 Clause 75. Taxable supply means a supply of goods or services or both which is leviable to tax under this Act. 2 Clause 108. Taxable territory means the territory to which the provisions of this Act apply. 2 Clause 109. Non-taxable territory means the territory which is outside the taxable territory. 2 Clause 79. India means the territory of India as referred to in Article 1 of the Constitution, its territorial waters, seabed and subsoil underlying such waters, continental shelf excluding exclusive economic zone or any other maritime zone as referred to in the Territorial Waters, Continental Shelf, Exclusive Economic Zones and Other Maritime Zones Act, and the airspace above its territory and territorial waters. Section 2, Clause 56. Supplier in relation to any goods or services or both shall mean the person supplying the said goods or services or both, and shall include an agent acting as such on behalf of such supplier in relation to the goods or services or both supplied. However, a person who organizes or arranges directly or indirectly supply of specified actionable claims, including a person who owns, operates or manages digital or electronic platform for such supply, shall be deemed to be a supplier of such actionable claims, whether such actionable claims are supplied by him, through him, and whether consideration in money or money's worth, including virtual digital assets, for supply of such actionable claims is paid or conveyed to him or through him or placed at his disposal in any manner, and all the provisions of this act shall apply to such supplier of specified actionable claims, as if he is the supplier liable to pay the tax in relation to the supply of such actionable claims. Section 2, Clause 105. To be honest, this is us reading this paragraph for the fourth time. Until the third time, I was pretty lost right after the third or fourth line. Now, after round 4, I won't say I'm like super confident or super thorough with this thing. I still have some not so clear idea about this, but I can surely say that I understand far better than previously. I still need some example to understand it in a much more concrete manner, but somehow I can understand this, that it's like an aggregator website that can enable actionable claim. So that aggregator website or that platform will also be considered as a supplier. So that is the rough idea that I'm getting out of it. It is still not fully clear. Let us be thorough about it. Let us wait for it. We will anyway read one more round. We were closing the open loops that have been there so far. We will close this also eventually. Okay, recipient of supply of goods and or services means where a consideration is payable for the supply of goods or services or both the person who is liable to pay that consideration. Where no consideration is payable for the supply of goods, the person to whom the goods are delivered or made available, or to whom possession or use of the goods is given or made available. And where no consideration is payable for the supply of a service, the person to whom the service is rendered, and any reference to a person to whom a supply is made shall be construed as a reference to the recipient of the supply. Okay, and shall include an agent acting as such on behalf of the recipient in relation to goods or services or both supplied. 2 Clause 93. Who is a person? An individual, a HUF, a company, a firm, an LLP, an association of persons or a body of individuals, whether incorporated or not, in India or outside India, any corporation established by or under any central, state or provincial act or government company as defined in section 245 of the Companies Act, any body corporate incorporated by or under the laws of a country outside India, a cooperative society registered under any law relating to cooperative societies, a local authority, central government or state government, society as defined under the Societies Registration Act 1860, a trust, every artificial juridical person not falling above. Our discussion in the study material will principally be confined to the provisions of CGST and IGST laws, as the specific state GST laws are outside the scope of syllabus. Third point, concept of supply, section 7 of the CGST Act. The concept of supply is the keystone of the GST architecture. The provisions relating to the meaning and scope of supply are contained in chapter 3 of the CGST Act, read with various schedules given under the said Act. Following sections and schedules shall be discussed in this chapter to understand the concept of supply. So section 7 talks about meaning and scope of supply. Section 8, taxability of composite and mixed supplies. Schedule 1, activities to be treated as supply even if made without consideration. Schedule 2, activities or transactions to be treated as supply of goods or as supply of services. Schedule 3, activities or transactions which shall be treated neither as supply of goods nor as supply of services. Now let us talk about section 7, meaning and scope of supply. Supply includes all forms of supply of goods or services or both, such as sale, transfer, barter, exchange, license, rental, lease or disposal made or agreed to be made for a consideration by a person in the course or furtherance of business. Clause AA. The activities or transactions by a person other than an individual to its members or constituents or vice versa for cash, deferred payment or other valuable consideration. Explanation. For the purpose of this clause, it is hereby clarified that notwithstanding anything contained in any other law for the time being in force or any judgment, decree or order of any court, tribunal or authority, the person and its members or constituents shall be deemed to be two separate persons, and the supply of activities or transactions inter se shall be deemed to take place from one such person to another. So, what is the example that we can readily quote for this clause and explanation is that the Resident Welfare Association, they remit the electricity bill of the residents living in that colony. So, for that they charge some nominal fees for that. So, for that particular transaction is deemed as supply, and for that nominal charges, if GST is applicable, yes, you have to charge GST. Next, importation of services for a consideration whether or not in the course or furtherance of business. So the examples that we can recollect is a person hiring architect services from a foreign land, and he paid like $1,000 or $2,000 for that. So that is importation of services, and definitely they have to charge GST for that. It doesn't matter whether it is for personal purpose or business purpose, we have to charge GST for that. The activities specified in Schedule 1 made or agreed to be made without a consideration. So whatever we see in Schedule 1, we have to see. Okay. Subsection 1A, where certain transactions or activities constitute a supply in accordance with the provisions of subsection 1, they shall be treated either as supply of goods or supply of services as referred to in Schedule 2. Okay, let's go to subsection 2. Notwithstanding anything contained in subsection 1, activities or transactions specified in Schedule 3 or such activities or transactions undertaken by the central government, state government or any local authority in which they are engaged as public authorities as may be notified by the government on the recommendations of the council shall be treated neither as a supply of goods nor as a supply of services. Subject to the provisions of subsections 1, 1A and 2, government may, on the recommendations of the council, specify by notification the transactions that are to be treated as a supply of goods and not as supply of services, and supply of services and not as a supply of goods. So analysis. So they are saying that section 7, the definition is an inclusive definition and does not define the term exhaustively. It defines the scope of supply in an inclusive manner. Clause A of subsection 1 illustrates the forms of supply, but the list is not exhaustive. This is further substantiated by the use of words such as in the definition. So, the meaning and scope of supply in terms of section 7 can be understood in following parameters. In terms of following parameters, supply should be of goods or services, it should be made for a consideration, it should be made in the course or furtherance of business. These are the basic 3 parameters, but sometimes even if supply is made without consideration, you will still get it, you will call it as supply. But anyway, here they are talking only about section 7. So the base section 7, these 3 parameters should be fulfilled. On that note, we have completed the first segment of today's revision. So this is completed. We have started 4th round of revision of chapter 2. So first 10 pages completed. Now let us go to the 3rd round of revision for this page number 52 to 56. Same chapter 52 to 56. Okay, let us begin. Taxability of tenancy rights under GST. CBIC has clarified the taxability of tenancy rights under GST as under Pagadi system, that is, a transfer of tenancy rights against tenancy premium is prevalent in some states. In Pagadi system, the tenant acquires tenancy rights in the property against payment of tenancy premium called Pagadi. The landlord may be the owner of the property, but the possession of the same lies with the tenant. The tenant pays periodic rent to the landlord as long as he occupies the property. The tenant also usually has the option to sell the tenancy right of the said property, and in such a case has to share a percentage of the proceeds with the owner of the land as laid down in the tenancy agreement. Alternatively, the landlord pays to tenant the prevailing tenancy premium to get the property vacated. Such properties in Maharashtra are governed by Maharashtra Rent Control Act 1999. It has been clarified that the activity of transfer of tenancy rights against consideration is squarely covered under supply of service liable to GST. It is a form of lease or renting of property, and such activity is specifically declared to be a service in para 2 of schedule 2 as discussed in the table above. That is, any lease, tenancy, easement, license to occupy land is a supply of service. Although stamp duty and registration charges have been levied on such transfer of tenancy rights, it shall still be subject to GST merely because a transaction or supply involves execution of documents which may require registration and payment of registration fee and stamp duty would not preclude them from the scope of supply and from payment of GST. The transfer of tenancy rights cannot be treated as sale of land or building in para 5 of schedule 3. Thus, it is not a negative list activity. This concept is discussed under next heading, and consequently a consideration for the said shall attract levy of GST. To sum up, the activity of transfer of tenancy rights is squarely covered under the scope of supply and taxable per se. The transfer of tenancy rights to a new tenant against consideration in the form of tenancy premium is taxable. Okay. However, renting of residential dwelling for use as a residence to an unregistered person is exempt. Hence, grant of tenancy rights in a residential dwelling for use as residence dwelling against tenancy premium or periodic rent or both to an unregistered person is exempt. As regards services provided by outgoing tenant by way of surrendering the tenancy rights against consideration in the form of a portion of tenancy premium is liable to GST. Okay, so this Pagadi system has again remained not so clear to us. Let us acknowledge this, just put a pin on this, and let us move on to the next part. Clarification on agreeing to the obligation to refrain from an act or to tolerate an act or a situation or to do an act. Agreeing to the obligation to refrain from an act or to tolerate an act or a situation or to do an act has been specifically declared to be a supply of service in para 5 of 5E of schedule 2 if the same constitutes a supply within the meaning of the CGST Act. So let us talk about them one by one. Agreeing to the obligation to refrain from an act. Example of activities that would be covered by this part of the expression would include non-compete agreements where one party agrees not to compete with the other party in a product, service or geographical area against a consideration paid by the other party. Another example of such activities would be a builder refraining from constructing more than a certain number of floors, even though permitted to do so by the municipal authorities, against a compensation paid by the neighboring housing project which wants to protect its sunlight, or an industrial unit refraining from manufacturing activity during certain hours against an agreed compensation paid by a neighboring school which wants to avoid noise during those hours. Agreeing to the obligation to tolerate an act or a situation. This would include activities such as a shopkeeper allowing a hawker to operate from the common pavement in front of his shop against a monthly payment by the hawker, or a residential welfare association tolerating the use of loudspeakers for early morning prayers by a school located in the colony subject to the school paying an agreed sum to the RWA as compensation. Agreeing to the obligation to do an act. This would include the case where an industrial unit agrees to install equipment for zero emission discharge at the behest of the RWA of a neighboring residential complex against a consideration paid by such RWA, even though the emission or discharge from the industrial unit was within permissible limits and there was no legal obligation upon the individual unit to do so. Above three activities must comply with the following conditions. There must be an express or implied agreement or contract must exist. Above three activities must be under an agreement or a contract, whether express or implied, to fall within the ambit of para 5E of Schedule 2. In other words, one of the parties to such agreement or contract must be under a contractual obligation to either refrain, tolerate, or do. Such contractual arrangement must be an independent arrangement in its own right. Such arrangement or agreement can take the form of an independent standalone contract or may form part of another contract. Thus, a person can be said to be making a supply by way of refraining from doing something or tolerating some act or situation to another person if the person was under an obligation to do so and then performed accordingly. Okay, so on that note, moving on, such a contract cannot be imagined or presumed to exist just because there is a flow of money from one party to another. There must be an express or implied promise by the recipient of money to agree to do or abstain from doing something in return for the money paid to him. Consideration must flow in return to this contract or agreement. Some consideration must flow in return from the other party to this contract or agreement to the the language is not so clear here. Some consideration must flow in return from the other party based on this agreement to the first party for such refraining, tolerating, or doing. Okay. Which of the following activities or transactions qualify as supply of goods? Dhruv Electronics supplies washing machines to its customers. Totally a supply. They are asking if it is supply as goods. Yes, it is supply of goods only. Big Bang Steel Limited supplies a machinery on rent to Jigyasa manufacturer. This is supply of service. Larsen Technicians retreats the tires given by Deen Dayal Automobiles on job work basis. So job work basis service. Vigyan Technologies develop a customized software. This is also service. So this is only supply of goods. Okay, so we have completed round 3 of this segment, page number 52 to 56. Let us move on to the last 3 pages of this chapter. We will revise second round, 72 to 75. Okay, 73, 74, 75. We will start from here because I remember reading this yesterday. So we'll start from here. So this is actually page number 73, 74 and 75. Mixed supplies. Mixed supply means 2 or more individual supplies of goods or services or any combination thereof made in conjunction with each other by a taxable person for a single price where such supply does not constitute a composite supply. Section 2, clause 74. The individual supplies are independent of each other and are not naturally bundled. How to determine if a particular supply is a mixed supply? In order to identify if the particular supply is a mixed supply, the first requisite is to rule out that the supply is a composite supply. A supply can be a mixed supply only if it is not a composite supply. As a corollary, it can be said that if the transaction consists of supplies not naturally bundled in the ordinary course of business, then the possibility of it being a mixed supply needs to be checked. Okay. Once the amenability of the transaction as a composite supply is ruled out and a single consideration is charged for the entire supply of different components, it would be treated as a mixed supply, classified in terms of supply of goods or services attracting highest rate of tax. A supply of package consisting of canned foods, sweets, chocolates, cakes, dry fruits, aerated drink and fruit juices when supplied for a single price is a mixed supply. Each of these items can be supplied separately and is not dependent on any other. It shall be a mixed supply if these items are supplied separately or separate prices are charged. A shopkeeper selling storage water bottles along with refrigerator for a single price. Bottles and refrigerator can be priced and sold separately and are not naturally bundled, so such supplies are mixed supplies. A house is given on rent through a single rent deed, one floor which is to be used as residence and the other for housing a printing press at a lump sum rent amount. Such renting for two different purposes is not naturally bundled in the ordinary course of business. Set supplies or mixed supply. How to determine the tax liability on mixed supplies? A mixed supply comprising of two or more supplies shall be treated as supply of that particular supply which attracts the highest rate of tax. Shringar Enterprises supplies 10,000 kits at 50 rupees each, amounting to 5 lakhs to Raghav General Store. Each kit consists of one shampoo, one face wash, and one kajal pencil. It is a mixed supply and it is treated as supply of that particular supply which attracts highest tax rate. Assuming that the rate of tax applicable on shampoo is 18%, face wash is 28%, and on kajal pencil is 12%. In the given case, highest tax rate on face wash is 28, which will be charged on the entire value of rupees 5 lakhs. More than one supply made together and taxed at the individual rates. There can also be a case where an activity or transaction involves more than one supply of goods or services or both, but neither they are composite supplies nor can be categorized as mixed supplies, that is, all supplies carry independent significance. In such a case, if separate consideration is indicated against each supply, each such supply shall be charged at the respective rate applicable to that particular supply. In case of servicing of cars involving supply of both goods, spare parts and services, where the value of goods and services are shown separately, the goods and services would be liable to tax at the rates applicable to such goods and services separately. Jaskaran gift packages supplies gift packages at rupees 30 each to its customers. Each package consists of 2 chocolates, 2 fruit juice bottles, and a packet of toy balloons. Rates of GST applicable on chocolates, fruit juice bottles, and toy balloons are 18%, 12%, and 5% respectively. Jaskaran is liable to pay GST at. So he is selling it as a package. So package consists of 2 chocolate, 2 fruit juice, and a packet of toy balloon. So if it was like this, like let's say he's supplying separately in like totally individual items, then they will carry separate value of no rates of tax. But he's selling it as package, so it will be deemed as mixed supply. That means the rule is apply the highest rate of tax. So 18% on the price charged for the gift package. So the answer is B. So on that note, we have completed the revision part for the day. Now let us go the fresh reading. Let me open charge under GST. Okay, let's begin the round 1 of a new chapter, chapter 3, charge of GST. Okay, extent and commencement of GST acts, levy and collection of CGST or IGST, and composition levy. So these are the things that we are largely going to study in this chapter. Okay, let us start reading. Power to levy tax is drawn from the Constitution of India to pave way for the introduction of GST. 101st Constitutional Amendment 2016 Act was passed. By virtue of this act, enabling provision was made to levy GST on supply of goods or services or both in India. central excise duty, state VAT, and certain specific tax, state-specific taxes and service tax were subsumed into a comprehensive GST. Okay, the very basis for the charge of tax in any taxing statute is the taxable event, that is the occurrence of the event which triggers levy of tax. As discussed earlier, the taxable event under GST is supply. CGST and SGST or UTGST are levied on all intrastate supplies and or of goods and or services, while IGST is levied on all interstate supplies of goods and or services. The provisions relating to levy and collection of CGST and IGST are contained in Section 9 of the CGST Act and Section 5 of the IGST Act respectively. Let us now have a fundamental idea of intrastate supply and interstate supply. As a general rule, where the location of the supplier and the place of supply of goods or services are in the same state or union territory, it is treated as intrastate supply of goods or services respectively. Similarly, where the location of the supplier and the place of supply of goods or services are in two different states or two different union territories, a state and a union territory, it is treated as interstate supply of goods or services respectively. The concepts of place of supply and the meaning of the location of the supplier have been elaborated in the next chapter, place of supply, in this module. Consequently, the meaning of terms interstate supply and intrastate supply has been explained in detail. Okay. It is important to note that at intermediate level, provisions pertaining to import and export of goods have not been covered. These will be discussed in detail at the final level. Okay. Relevant definitions. Central tax means the central goods and service tax levied under Section 9 of the CGST Act. Integrated tax means the integrated goods and service tax levied under, I think, IGST Act. State tax means the tax levied under any State Goods and Service Tax Act 2 Clause 104. Goods means every kind of movable property other than money and securities, but includes actionable claim, growing crops, grass and things attached to or forming part of the land which are agreed to be severed before supply or under a contract of supply. Electronic commerce means the supply of goods or services or both, including digital products, over digital or electronic networks 2 Clause 44. E-commerce operator means any person who owns, operates or manages a digital or electronic facility or platform for electronic commerce. 2 Clause 45. Exempt supply means supply of any goods or services or both which attracts nil rate of tax or which may be wholly exempt from tax under Section 11 or under Section 6 of the Integrated Goods and Service Tax Act and includes non-taxable supply. Non-taxable supply means a supply of goods or services or both which is not leviable to tax under this Act or under IGST Act 2 Clause 79. Aggregate turnover means the aggregate value of all taxable supplies excluding the value of inward supplies on which tax is payable by a person on reverse charge basis. Means aggregate value of taxable supplies excluding the value of inward supplies on which tax is payable by a person on reverse charge basis. Exempt supplies, export of goods or services or both, and interstate supplies of persons having the same permanent account be computed on all India basis but excludes central tax, state tax, union territory tax, integrated tax and cess. Prescribed means prescribed by the rules made under this Act on the recommendations of the Council. 2 Clause 87. Business includes any trade, commerce, manufacture, profession, vocation, adventure, wager or any other similar activity, whether or not it is for a pecuniary benefit. This set of transactions, I think, we read in the previous chapter itself. The definition was covered there. So anyway, just let me quickly read this through. Any activity or transaction in connection with or incidental or ancillary to A above, Any activity or transaction in the nature of A above, whether or not there is volume, frequency, continuity, or regularity of such transaction. Supply or acquisition of goods, including capital assets and services in connection with commencement or closure of business. Provision by a club, association, society, or any such body for a subscription or any other consideration of the facilities or benefits to its members as the case may be. Admission for a consideration of persons to any premises and services supplied by a person as the holder of an office which has been accepted by him in the course or furtherance of his trade, profession, or vocation. Activities of a race club, including by way of a totalizator or a licensed bookmaker, or activities of a licensed bookmaker in such club. Any activity or transaction undertaken by the central government, a state government, or any local authority in which they are engaged as public authorities. Consideration. Okay, this we just read today. Anyway, let me quickly read through. The definition person is also, it's a repeat only. Anyway, consideration in relation to supply of goods or services or both includes any payment made or to be made, whether in money or otherwise, in respect of or in response to or for the inducement of the supply of goods or services or both, whether by the recipient or by any other person, but shall not include any subsidy given by the central government or state government. The monetary value of any act or forbearance in respect of, in response to, or for the inducement of the supply of goods or services or both, whether by the recipient or by any other person, but shall not include any subsidy given by the central government or a state government. However, a deposit given in respect of the supply of goods or services or both shall not be considered as payment made for such supply unless the supplier applies such deposit as consideration for the said supply. Person includes an individual, a HUF, a company, a firm, an LLP, an association of person, body of individuals, whether incorporated or not, in India or outside India, any corporation established by or under central government or state government or provincial act or government company as defined under section 2 clause 45 of Companies Act 2013, any body corporate incorporated by or under the laws of country outside India, a cooperative society registered under any law relating to cooperative societies, a local authority, central government or state government, society as defined under Societies Registration Act, a trust, every artificial juridical person not falling above. Recipient. A recipient of supply of goods or services means where a consideration is payable for the supply of goods or services or both the person who is liable to pay that consideration. Where no consideration is payable for the supply of goods, the person to whom the goods are delivered or made available, or to whom possession or use of the goods is given or made available. Where no consideration is payable for the supply of a service, the person to whom the service is rendered, and any reference to a person to whom a supply is made shall be construed as a reference to the recipient of the supply and shall include an agent acting as such on behalf of the recipient in relation to the goods or services or both supplied. Registered person means a person who is registered under section 25 but does not include a person having unique identity number. Reverse charge means the liability to pay tax by the recipient of supply of goods or services or both instead of the supplier of such goods or services or both under section 9 subsection 3 or 9 subsection 4 or under section 5 subsection 3 or 5 subsection 4 of the IGST Act, section 2 clause 98. Services means anything other than goods, money and securities, but includes activities relating to the use of money or its conversion by cash or by any other mode from one form, currency or denomination to another form, currency or denomination for which a separate consideration is charged. Explanation: for the removal of doubts, it is hereby clarified that the expression services includes facilitating or arranging transactions in securities. Okay, so this supplier definition we just read today. So I'm just jumping this. I will just quickly read this taxable supply and taxable person, and we can conclude it with here for today's reading. Taxable supply means a supply of goods or services which is leviable to CGST Act. Taxable person means a person who is registered or liable to be registered under section 22 or 24 of the CGST Act. It is important to note that a person who is liable to be registered but has not taken registration and remains an unregistered person shall still be construed as a taxable person. A person not liable to be registered but has taken voluntary registration and got himself registered is also a taxable person. Okay, so with that, we have completed 7 pages of this new chapter. From this third topic, we will begin from tomorrow. So, making today's entry, charge of GST 3.1 to 3.7, and today's date is 19th of October 2025. So it will be due tomorrow for round 2. So tomorrow we will have the next 5 pages or 6 pages of supply under GST, the next 5 pages under 57 to 61 under supply under GST, and then we will have, okay, tomorrow we don't have round 4. So we will only have round 3, round 2, and then we will read another 7 to 8 pages of round 1, maybe page number 3.8 to 3.12 or 13. On that note, let us wrap up today's session. Thank you so much for joining. I will see you in tomorrow's lecture. Bye bye.